You want to know the biggest lie about war? It's not about combat. It's not about courage or cowardice or any of that. The biggest lie is what happens after. Here's the story everyone believes. A soldier goes to war. He sees terrible things, does what he has to do, survives. He comes home changed, sure, a little quieter, maybe has some rough nights, but with time, with support, with love from his family, he heals. Gradually, the man who left comes back. The war fades into memory. Life continues. It's a beautiful story. Families need to believe it. Society needs to believe it. I've seen men just back from the front try to believe it themselves, standing in their childhood kitchens, telling themselves that this feeling, this terrible, hollow, glass wall feeling will pass. It doesn't pass. Picture this. 1945. A soldier steps off a train in hometown America. Banners wave, children run alongside, a brass band plays something patriotic. His mother cries. His girl throws her arms around him. Everyone's so happy the war is over. Their boy is home. And the soldier, he's watching all of it through glass. He sees the bunting and the smiles. He hears the music. He feels his mother's arms around him. And none of it quite reaches him. There's a barrier between him and all of it, invisible but absolute. He can't explain it. He wouldn't know where to start. Down the street, a woman complains to her neighbor about butter prices. Two men argue about a parking spot. Teenagers flirt on the corner. Normal things, American things. The war never touched these people. Not really. Their biggest hardship was rationing. Their sacrifice was doing without nylons. The soldier watches them, and he realizes something that will define the rest of his life. He used to be one of them. He used to care about things like parking spots and butter prices. He used to believe what they believe, that human life is precious, that violence is exceptional, that the world operates according to some kind of moral order. Now he doesn't. Now he can't. Not because of what he saw over there, because of what he did. This is the part nobody talks about. The myth is that soldiers come home haunted by what they witnessed, the death, the destruction, the chaos. And sure, that's part of it. Men who've seen friends blown apart carry those images forever. But you can witness terrible things and recover. Civilians do it, doctors do it, war correspondents do it. You process what you saw, you grieve, you move forward. It takes time, but the self that existed before remains intact. You were an observer, a victim perhaps, a survivor certainly, but you were not an agent. Things happened to you. For the infantryman, it's different. Things didn't just happen to him. Things happened through him. His hands held the rifle. His finger pulled the trigger. He watched men fall because of what he did, not what he witnessed, what he did. That's a different kind of weight entirely. See, the family waiting at that train station thinks they're welcoming home the boy who left. Same face, same name, maybe a little thinner, a little older around the eyes. They expect him to gradually return to who he was, like a plant recovering from a hard winter. They're not welcoming home the boy who left. That boy is dead, killed in the same action that killed the enemy. What steps off that train is someone else wearing the same face, carrying the same dog tags, answering to the same name. And here's the thing, he can never tell them that. So from the first moment he's home, the performance begins. He acts like the person they expect. He laughs at the right times, says the right things, pretends to care about the things they care about. He becomes an actor playing the role of himself. That performance never really ends. You want to see the gap between soldier and civilian? Watch what happens at a family dinner when someone asks about the war. The soldier pauses, just a fraction of a second, but it's there, while he decides which version of the truth to tell. Not the real version, never that. A version that sounds brave but not brutal, dangerous but not disturbing. A version they can handle. When he finishes his sanitized story, they thank him for his service, and he nods and accepts their gratitude, and feels more alone than he did in any foxhole. Thank you for your service. Let me tell you something about that phrase. It exists because civilians don't know what else to say. They want to acknowledge something, but they don't know what. So they offer those 4 words, like a password, a way of saying, I appreciate what you did, whatever it was. Please don't tell me the details. We thank soldiers for serving, like they volunteered at a soup kitchen. We don't thank them for killing, which is what many of them actually did. The euphemism is the gap, and the soldier on the receiving end of that phrase knows exactly what it means. You're grateful I did the things you can't imagine, and you'd prefer not to think about what those things actually were. That's the first lie, that the man who comes home is the same man who left, just damaged, just in need of healing, just a matter of time before he returns to normal. He's not coming back. There's nothing to return to. The person he was before he crossed that line ceased to exist the moment he crossed it. What walks through the door wearing his face is someone new, someone changed in ways that don't reverse, someone who will spend the rest of his life pretending to be who he was, so the people he loves don't have to meet who he's become. And that's just the beginning. If the man who comes home is genuinely different, not damaged, but transformed, then we need to ask a harder question. What exactly changed? What happened over there that turned him into someone else? To understand that, we need to look at what innocence actually means. And I don't mean the dictionary definition. Everyone thinks they know what innocence is: purity, naivety, the absence of experience. A child is innocent because she hasn't seen the world's ugliness yet. A young man is innocent because he still believes in fairy tales. That's not what I'm talking about. There's a different kind of innocence, a more fundamental kind, that has nothing to do with what you've seen or experienced. It has to do with what you've done. Specifically, it's the state of having never crossed the bright line that divides human experience into two categories: those who have taken human life and those who haven't. That's the line that matters. That's the line that doesn't uncross. You can witness death and remain innocent in this sense. You can survive trauma, endure hardship, see things that give you nightmares for years, and still remain on one side of that line. Because witnessing, however terrible, leaves the self fundamentally intact. You were there. You saw it. But you didn't cause it. Causing it is different. Causing it changes what you are. Let me show you what I mean. Picture two soldiers in the same foxhole. They've shared the same mud, the same cold, the same terror when the shells come in. They've watched the same friends die, endured the same sleepless nights, eaten the same cold rations. By any ordinary measure, they've experienced the same war. But one is a radio man. His job is communication, relaying coordinates, passing messages, keeping the company connected to command. The other is infantry. His job is killing. Both come home changed. Both have trouble sleeping. Both struggle to connect with civilians who don't understand. But watch them at a dinner party when someone mentions violence in the news, some crime, some atrocity, and asks with genuine horror in their voice, how could anyone do something like that? The radio man thinks, I've seen terrible things. The infantryman thinks, I know exactly how. Same foxhole, same war, different universe. The radio man remains, in this deeper sense, innocent. He witnessed war's cost. The infantryman caused some of it. And that difference shapes everything that follows, not because one is more traumatized than the other, but because one has knowledge the other doesn't have. Knowledge about himself, about what he's capable of, about the limits of the moral principles he was raised with. Here's what civilians don't understand. They operate on a bedrock assumption that human life is sacred. Not as a philosophical position they've reasoned their way to, but as a foundational belief so deep it feels like reality itself. Of course human life is sacred. Of course killing is wrong. Of course violence is exceptional, aberrant, something that happens elsewhere, to other people, by monsters who are fundamentally different from us. The combat infantryman knows better, not because he's cynical, not because the war made him hard, but because he's been the exception to every rule civilians consider absolute. He's taken life. He's watched men fall because of his actions, and he knows, with the kind of knowledge that doesn't fade, that he could do it again if circumstances demanded. He knows that belief in the sanctity of life has limits, because he has been the limit. This doesn't make him a monster. It doesn't make him evil. Under the circumstances, what he did was necessary, perhaps even right. War requires it. Defense requires it. The men beside him would have died if he hadn't done what he did. But it changes him. Not into something worse, exactly. Into something different. Something that can no longer hold the same assumptions as the civilians around him. Something that stands on the other side of a line they don't even know exists. You want to know why "thank you for your service" rings hollow? This is why. We thank soldiers for serving, a word that could describe working at a charity, delivering mail, teaching school. We don't thank them for killing, which is what many of them actually did. We use the euphemism because the truth is too uncomfortable. Because acknowledging what soldiers really did would require acknowledging what we really asked of them. And so the gap persists. The civilian thinks they're expressing gratitude. The veteran hears the dodge, the careful avoidance of what actually happened, the polite refusal to see what he became for their benefit. He accepts their thanks because what else can he do? But the thanks doesn't bridge anything. It just highlights the distance. Not all soldiers cross this line. Let me be clear about that. Plenty of military personnel serve with distinction, endure hardship, sacrifice years of their lives, and never take another human life. They're on bases, on ships, and support roles. They face danger, they contribute, they deserve respect. But they remain, in this specific sense, innocent. The bright line stays uncrossed. Infantry is different. Combat infantry crosses the line. That's the job. That's what they're trained to do, what they're sent to do, what they actually do. And when they come home, they carry the knowledge of having done it, not as a memory to be processed, but as a fundamental fact about who they are. The myth says innocence is lost gradually through exposure to the world's hardness. You see enough, you suffer enough, and bit by bit your innocence erodes like a stone worn smooth by water. The truth is sharper than that. Innocence doesn't erode. It dies in a specific moment with a specific action, and it doesn't come back. Not with time, not with therapy, not with all the love in the world. And here's the question that follows from this. What actually happens in that moment? What does it feel like to cross the line? Not in the movies, where there's dramatic music and anguished faces and moral wrestling. In reality. In a hedgerow or a bombed-out building or a frozen field. Let me tell you what I've seen. The movies get killing wrong. All of them. Every single one. They show you a soldier facing the terrible necessity of taking a life. You see his face, the anguish, the moral weight, the moment of decision. Music swells. The camera lingers. He pulls the trigger with full awareness of what he's doing, and afterward he's haunted by it. That night, staring at the stars, he reflects on what he's become. That's Hollywood. Here's what actually happens. A hedgerow in France. A young soldier, rifle up, heart hammering so hard he can feel it in his teeth. Movement ahead, could be enemy, could be shadow, could be wind stirring the branches. Training doesn't care which. Front sight, squeeze, follow through. The rifle kicks. A man falls. And, then nothing. No time to process. No moment of reflection. There's more movement to his right, someone shouting. The sound of automatic fire from somewhere close. He shifts position, keeps his head down, does his job. The kill becomes one event among dozens in a chaos that doesn't pause for moral reckoning. He doesn't feel like a murderer. He doesn't feel anything at all. The body does what it was trained to do. The mind doesn't interfere, because interference gets you killed. He's operating beneath thought, beneath morality, an animal doing what animals do when survival is on the line. The anguished decision, the weight of the moment, the awareness of what he's doing, none of it. There isn't time, there isn't space. The war doesn't pause so soldiers can contemplate the ethics of their actions. This is the first truth about killing. In the moment, there's absence. Not peace, not rage, not anguish. Just a cold efficiency that takes over when survival demands it, and a mind that steps aside to let the body work. The reckoning comes later. Maybe that night, if there's quiet. Maybe 2 weeks later, eating sea rations in a moment of stillness. Maybe years after, in a suburban house, in the dead of night, when the mind has nothing to distract it. That's when the face comes back. The man he killed, young, maybe 20, had a mother somewhere who probably still lights a candle for him, didn't want to be there any more than anyone else did. Had a name, a history, a life that ended because a young American's finger squeezed the trigger in a hedgerow in France. I did that. Not the army, not my country, not the war as some abstract force. Me, my hands, my decision. And then the recognition that changes everything. I could do it again. I have done it again. This is who I am now. This is the part nobody warns you about. Alongside the guilt, if there is guilt, alongside the horror, if there is horror, there's something else. Recognition. The discovery of what you're capable of. The knowledge that your reluctance to take life wasn't some unshakable moral core, but just programming that could be overwritten, that was overwritten, that allowed you to do the thing you were taught was unthinkable. Before combat, a man might believe all sorts of things about killing, that it's wrong, that it's justified under certain circumstances, that he could never do it, or would only do it in the most extreme situation. These beliefs feel solid, feel like part of who he is. They're theoretical. They've never been tested. The first kill tests them, and when the test comes, those beliefs don't matter. The body acts. The mind catches up later. And when it does catch up, it finds that all those beliefs, all that moral architecture has been rendered irrelevant by a single act that happened faster than thought. He doesn't believe anything about killing anymore. He knows. There's a difference between believing something and knowing it. You can believe a stove is hot. You know it's hot after you've touched it. The infantryman has touched the stove. He's no longer operating on belief. He's operating on knowledge. Knowledge of what he's capable of, knowledge of what he's already done, knowledge that can't be unlearned. Here's what happens to the civilian self, the person who existed before combat. He dies. Not all at once, not dramatically. But the person who believed human life was absolutely sacred, who held that belief not as philosophy but as bedrock, ceases to exist. He's replaced by someone who knows that belief has limits and knows exactly where those limits are because he's already crossed them. And here's the part nobody wants to hear. You don't miss him. That innocent version of yourself becomes a liability in combat. He would hesitate. He would question. He would get men killed with his hesitation and questioning. So you let him go. You don't mourn him, because mourning him would be a luxury you can't afford. The war keeps coming. There's no time for grief over who you used to be. By the time you notice he's gone, you're too far past the line to find your way back. Sometimes a man describes his first kill with a flatness that surprises civilians. No drama, no anguish. Matter of fact, like describing a job completed. You might think this means he's cold, or damaged, or lacking some essential human quality. You'd be wrong. What you're seeing is the survival mechanism that made the killing possible in the first place. The emotions that would have paralyzed him, they were suppressed for survival. Some of them never fully returned. The flatness isn't pathology, it's adaptation. The mind did what it had to do to keep the body alive. And now, years later, when he tries to describe that moment, he can only describe it the way he experienced it, without the emotional weight civilians expect. Because there wasn't emotional weight in the moment. The weight came after. And the weight after is hard to put into words. You want to understand combat veterans? Start here. Not with what they saw, though that matters. Not with what they survived, though that matters too. Start with what they did, what their hands accomplished, what they discovered about themselves in the discovering. The moment of first killing isn't just the taking of another life. It's the death of the self that existed before. It's the birth of someone new, someone capable, someone changed, someone who carries a weight that civilians will never lift and can never fully comprehend. So here's the question that follows. If the killing creates someone new, someone fundamentally different from who existed before, why can't he change back? Why can't time and love and therapy and all the good intentions in the world restore him to who he was? What is it about this knowledge that makes it permanent? Everyone wants a recovery story. Family wants to believe their son will eventually come back to us. Society wants to believe that with enough support, enough programs, enough thanking for service, veterans will heal and reintegrate. Even veterans themselves, especially early on, want to believe that this feeling, this distance, this glass wall is temporary, a phase, something that will pass. It doesn't pass. Here's why. What happened isn't damage, it's knowledge. You can recover from damage. A wound closes, a bone knits. Even psychological wounds, trauma, grief, fear, can heal with time and support. The mind is remarkably resilient. Given the right conditions, it can process terrible experiences and move forward. But the combat veteran doesn't have a wound. He has information. Information about himself, about what he's capable of, about the limits of principles he once thought absolute. And information doesn't heal. It doesn't fade. It doesn't resolve with therapy. You can't unknow that you're capable of killing. This isn't a memory you can reframe. It's not a belief that can be updated with new evidence. It's knowledge, experiential, embodied, permanent. Before you killed, you believed various things about yourself and about life's sanctity. After you killed, and knowledge doesn't unknow. Think about it this way. Can you unknow how to ride a bicycle? Can you truly forget what your first love looked like? Can you remove from your mind the knowledge of where you grew up, what your mother's voice sounds like, what fire feels like against skin? These things are part of you now. They've integrated into who you are. The combat veteran's knowledge works the same way. The fact that he is killed, the knowledge of what that felt like, of what he's capable of, isn't stored in some file that can be deleted. It's woven into his understanding of himself. And here's what makes it different from other kinds of knowledge. It's knowledge about identity. It's not knowing that something happened. It's knowing what you are. The veteran doesn't remember that he killed. He knows he's a killer. The label becomes part of him, even if he never uses the word, even if he spends his life avoiding it. So when the well-meaning therapist talks about processing trauma and healing, the veteran cooperates. Why not? The nightmares are real. The startle response is real. The difficulty connecting with civilians who haven't been there, that's real too. And therapy can help with all of that. It genuinely can. A good therapist can help a veteran manage symptoms, develop coping strategies, function better in daily life. The nightmares might decrease. The hypervigilance might soften. He might learn to be present in conversations, to enjoy things he used to enjoy, to feel less like a stranger in his own life. But when he leaves that office, he still knows what he knows. No amount of talking changes the fundamental fact. He has killed and could kill again if circumstances demanded. That's not a trauma to be processed. That's who he is now. His wife asks how therapy went. Good, he says. We're making progress. And he means it. He is making progress on the symptoms, on the functioning, on the day-to-day. But the thing itself, the core knowledge, the identity transformation that hasn't budged, that doesn't budge. This is why the civilian model of recovery doesn't apply. The model assumes damage that can be repaired, a before state that can be restored. But the combat veteran isn't damaged. He's changed. And change doesn't reverse. You can't ungrow a tree back into a seed. Why do families want the myth? Because accepting the truth means grieving someone who's still alive. The person they knew, the son, the husband, the friend who left for war, isn't coming back. He's been replaced by someone else. Someone who looks the same, answers to the same name, shares many of the same memories, but someone different in ways that matter. Accepting that means mourning a kind of death while the person is still in the room. It means abandoning hope for reunion with who he was. It means learning to love who he's become without secretly waiting for him to revert. Most families can't do that. Most families keep hoping, keep looking for signs of the old him, keep believing that with enough time, enough love, enough patience, he'll come back to them. He won't. And the hoping, however well-intended, creates a subtle pressure. The veteran feels the family waiting for someone who no longer exists. He tries to perform that person, to give them what they want. But the performance exhausts him. and the gap between who they want and who he is grows wider with every attempt to close it. Here's the hard truth. The veteran doesn't want to go back to who he was before. This is the part families really don't want to hear. That innocent pre-combat self, he'd be useless now. He'd hesitate at the wrong moment, ask questions that have no answers, get paralyzed by moral considerations that combat doesn't accommodate. The veteran survived because that person died. The capability to function in combat required shedding who he was. He can't miss that person because that person would have gotten him killed. What he might want, what's actually impossible, is to have the capability he developed while keeping the innocence he lost, to be able to do what needed doing while still believing what he used to believe. But that's not how it works. The capability came at a cost. The cost was permanent. Therapy can help the veteran function. Love can make the weight more bearable. But nothing reverses the transformation. Nothing restores the person who left. And that creates a new problem. If the veteran now carries knowledge that civilians don't have, if he exists in a different moral universe than the people around him, what happens when he walks among them? What does it mean to live your life surrounded by people who believe things you can no longer believe? The civilian world runs on shared assumptions. They're so fundamental, so universal, that most people don't even notice they're making them. And just how reality works. Human life is sacred. Violence is exceptional, something that happens elsewhere, to other people, by criminals or enemies who are fundamentally different from us. Killing is unthinkable for normal people in normal circumstances. The rules of morality are stable, universal, absolute. The combat infantryman knows better. Not because he disagrees with these assumptions. In fact, he might hold them as ideals. The world probably works better when people believe human life is sacred. Society holds together because most people can't imagine killing. He understands the value of these beliefs, even respects them. But he can no longer hold them purely. He's been the exception to every one of them. He's killed. He's found violence not just thinkable but doable. He's discovered that the rules of morality have breaking points, and he knows exactly where they break because he's the one who broke them. This creates a gap that can't be bridged by explanation. Picture a family gathering, Thanksgiving maybe, or Christmas. The veteran sits at the table with people he loves, parents, siblings, cousins, their spouses and children, normal people, good people, people who've never crossed the line he crossed. Someone mentions the news, a crime, an atrocity, a shooting somewhere. How could anyone do something like that? They ask, genuine horror in their voices, real incomprehension. And the veteran, sitting there with his fork halfway to his mouth, knows exactly how, not the specifics of this particular crime, but the mechanism, how a human being crosses the line, how it happens faster than thought, how the body acts while the mind watches from somewhere outside, how you discover afterward what you're capable of, and how that discovery changes everything. He knows because he's done it, under different circumstances, for different reasons, with different justification, but he's crossed the same fundamental line. His hands know what their hands don't. So he nods along. Terrible, he says. Can't imagine. And the lies taste like ash in his mouth, but what's the alternative? Tell them the truth? Actually, I can imagine it quite easily because I've done similar things myself. Watch their faces change. Watch the way they look at him afterward. Watch the gap that's already invisible become a chasm. Better to pass the potatoes and keep quiet. This is what soldiers mean when they say civilians don't understand. It's not that civilians haven't seen what soldiers have seen, though that's part of it. It's that civilians still believe things the soldier can no longer believe. They operate on assumptions he's already violated. Every conversation, every interaction, every moment of connection happens across a divide they don't even know exists. And the soldier can feel it constantly. He's surrounded by people who share his language, his culture, his history, but who live in a different moral universe. When they make statements about right and wrong, he silently footnotes them, except for me. When they express shock at violence, he bites back the response, if you only knew. Every assumption they make about shared values carries his mental asterisk. This is the glass wall. You can see through it, you can talk through it, you can even love through it, but you can't remove it. Here is where it gets lonelier. The people who love the veteran most are often the people he can least be honest with. His wife, his parents, his closest friends. They have the most invested in seeing him as the person he was. They have the most to lose if he reveals what he's become. So he protects them by hiding the truth, and in hiding it, he creates a distance they can sense but can't name. His wife knows something is different. She's not stupid. She sees him go quiet at odd moments, notices the micro-expressions he thinks he's hiding, feels the part of him that's never quite present. But she doesn't know what it is, and he can't tell her, because telling her would make her see him differently, and he needs her to keep seeing him as someone she can love. So they operate in parallel. Two people in the same house, sharing the same bed, building a life together, and one of them carries a weight the other will never lift, holds knowledge the other will never hold, exists partly in a world the other can't enter. That's what marriage looks like on the other side of the line. Functional, even loving, but with a thread of experience that runs beside the relationship rather than through it. You want to know why veterans cluster together? Why they join organizations, attend reunions, gravitate toward each other at parties? This is why. Among other combat veterans, the glass wall doesn't exist. Nobody has to explain. Nobody has to pretend. Everyone in the room has crossed the same line. When they talk about what they did, nobody recoils. When they're quiet about certain things, nobody pushes. The moral universe is shared. For a few hours, the veteran can stop performing normalcy and just be who he is. It's not that they sit around swapping war stories. Most don't, at least not the real ones. It's just the relief of being among people who know, people who carry the same weight, people with whom the gap doesn't exist because they're all standing on the same side of it. The families notice this. They see the veteran more relaxed, more present, more himself with his army buddies than he is at home. They might feel hurt by it. Why can he connect with them but not with us? The answer is simple and painful because connecting with them doesn't require pretending. Nobody asks whether the veteran would rather be with his combat buddies than his family. The question is too hard. The answer might be both. He loves his family, he just can't fully show them who he is. With the men who were there, he doesn't have to show anything, they already know. This is life on the other side of the line. Constant performance, constant editing, constant management of the gap between who you are and who people need you to be. It's exhausting in ways that don't show. It costs something every day, even when everything looks fine from outside. And this is just a daily reality. We haven't even talked about what happens in the quiet moments, in the long nights, in the space between the performance and the sleep that doesn't come easily. What does this actually look like, day to day? Not the theory of it, the reality. The small moments where the glass wall thickens, the constant labor of seeming normal. Let me show you what living behind the glass actually feels like. Let me show you what a Saturday morning looks like on the other side of the line. A veteran wakes up, same as anyone. Maybe he slept well, maybe he didn't. There are good nights and bad nights, and after enough years you stop keeping track. He gets dressed, eats breakfast, kisses his wife, tells her he's running to the hardware store. Normal, ordinary, American. The hardware store is 5 minutes away. Fluorescent lights, concrete floors, aisles of screws and lumber and paint cans. He's there for something simple, hinges maybe, or a box of nails. The kind of errand that fills a Saturday. A young man walks past him in the aisle. Same build as someone he killed years ago in a country most Americans can't find on a map. Same coloring. Similar way of moving. For a split second, and it is a split second, nothing more, the veteran's body reacts before his mind can catch up. Where are the exits? Is this a threat? What's the distance to cover? His weight shifts, his eyes track. His hands remember what they're capable of. Then the conscious mind takes over. Ohio, hardware store, Saturday morning. Buying hinges. The young man walks on, oblivious. The veteran picks out his hinges, pays at the register, goes home. Total time elapsed, maybe 20 minutes. He doesn't tell his wife about that moment in the aisle. What would he say? I saw someone who looked like a dead enemy soldier, and for a second I was ready to act. That's not a conversation. That's a door he can never close once opened, so he says nothing. Just another Saturday. This is what the performance looks like. Not dramatic breakdowns, not obvious dysfunction. Just the constant, invisible labor of seeming normal, when normal is a language you no longer speak fluently. Every day, the combat veteran passes as one of the untouched. He gets up, goes to work, interacts with civilians who have no idea they're talking to someone fundamentally different from themselves. He laughs at the right times. He complains about the right things: traffic, weather, the game last night. He nods when people express shock at violence in the news. He never mentions that he's done violence himself. The passing is successful. Most people never notice anything amiss. His coworkers think he's a regular guy. His neighbors consider him friendly enough. The parents at his kid's school have no idea that the man making small talk about the PTA meeting has killed people with his bare hands. Well, with a rifle, but close enough, and that success costs something. Every interaction carries a small cognitive load. Monitoring what he says, editing his responses in real time, maintaining the fiction that he's one of them. It happens so automatically now that he barely notices he's doing it. But the effort is constant, and the effort drains. Watch how a veteran responds when someone asks about his service. There's a pause, usually less than a second, but it's there while he calculates. What does this person actually want to know? What can they handle? What version of the truth will satisfy them without revealing too much? He keeps several versions ready. The polished anecdote for casual acquaintances. Danger, bravery, camaraderie. The abbreviated summary for professional settings. I served in the infantry, saw some combat, glad to be home. The careful non-answer for people who push too hard. It's hard to talk about. The real version, the one that would actually explain what happened to him, that one never comes out. Not because he's hiding something shameful, exactly, but because there's no way to tell it. That doesn't change how people see him, and he's learned over years that he needs people to keep seeing him as normal. His job depends on it. His friendships depend on it. His marriage might depend on it. So the editing never stops. The performance never ends. He's always, on some level, playing a role, the role of the person he was before, the person everyone expects him to still be. Here's the exhausting part. It works. He's gotten good at this. 20 years of practice makes the performance nearly seamless. He can go days, weeks, without anyone noticing anything wrong. He functions. He contributes. He looks like a success story. But the gap between who he appears to be and who he actually is never closes. And living in that gap day after day, year after year, it takes something out of you that's hard to name. A slow drain that never quite empties you, but never lets you feel full either. You want to know the difference between a veteran who's doing well and one who's struggling? Sometimes it's just the quality of the performance. The struggling veteran hasn't learned to hide it yet. The one doing well has just gotten better at seeming fine. That's not cynicism. Some veterans genuinely are doing better than others. The nightmares fade for some. The startled response softens. The daily burden lightens. But even the ones who found a kind of peace, even they are still passing, still editing, still managing the gap between their inner truth and their outer presentation. There's no version of healed that includes forgetting what you are. The small moments are where you see it most clearly. Not the obvious triggers, the car backfiring, the 4th of July fireworks. Civilians know about those. It's the things nobody talks about. The way he scans every room he enters without thinking about it. The way crowds make him position himself near the exit. The way he notices threats that don't exist, not because he's paranoid, but because the part of him that was trained to notice never fully shut off. The way violent movies hit different. Civilians watch action scenes as entertainment. The veteran watches them as critiques. That's not how it works. That's not what it sounds like. That's not what blood looks like when it's real. He's not triggered, exactly. He's just aware of everything Hollywood gets wrong. And that awareness is another layer of separation between him and the people enjoying the show. The way he handles conflict. He's learned to de-escalate, to walk away, to let things go that his civilian self might have fought over. Not because the war made him passive, because the war taught him what fighting actually is, and nothing in civilian life rises to that level. The argument that feels urgent to his coworker feels trivial to him. The road rage that might lead another man to confrontation leads him to shrug and change lanes. This isn't virtue, it's perspective. When you've seen what real violence looks like, the small angers of ordinary life just don't register the same way. But here's the thing nobody mentions. Even this perspective is a form of distance. The civilian who gets angry about traffic, who argues about politics at Thanksgiving, who treats small conflicts as big deals, that civilian is fully engaged in the world around him. The veteran who shrugs it off, who can't take these things seriously, who knows how trivial they are compared to real problems, he's right, but he's also separate. Even his wisdom isolates him. There's no winning this. Full engagement would mean caring about things he can't bring himself to care about. Detachment means another layer of glass between him and everyone else. He navigates between them, finding the balance that lets him function, but the navigation itself is work, and so the performance continues. Morning after morning, year after year, a man who walks through the hardware store and sees ghosts in the aisles, who edits every conversation, who plays a role so convincing that no one knows it's a role, who loves his family and can't fully reach them, who succeeds at work and can't fully care, who lives in a world he helped protect and can never quite belong to. That's what it looks like behind the glass. Not tragedy, not drama, just the quiet labor of seeming normal when normal is something you lost the day you crossed the line. And if this is true, if even his daily functioning requires this constant performance, what does that mean for the people closest to him? The wife who shares his bed, the children who call him dad, the friends who think they know him. What happens to intimacy when you're carrying something you can never share? Here's the cruelest part. The people who love him most are often the people he can least be honest with. It sounds backward. You'd think intimacy would allow for truth. You'd think the wife who stood by him for 20 years, who knows his moods and habits and fears better than anyone, would be the one person he could let all the way in. But that's not how it works. Not for this. His wife has the most invested in seeing him as the person she married. She fell in love with that person. She built a life with that person. She needs that person to still exist, somewhere under whatever the war laid on top of him. If he showed her what he's really carrying, if he explained the distance she senses but can't name, he'd be giving her a stranger. The man she loves would be replaced by someone she doesn't know, someone who's done things she can't imagine, someone whose inner landscape is so different from hers that all those years of intimacy were, in some sense, a shared illusion. He can't do that to her, won't do it. So he protects her by hiding the truth. And in hiding it, he creates the very distance she wishes he'd close. She feels it, of course. She's not stupid. 20 years of marriage teaches you to read a person, and what she reads is a man who's never quite present, a man who goes quiet at odd moments for reasons he won't explain, a man who loves her. She knows he loves her, but keeps some part of himself locked away. She's tried to reach it, probably more than he knows. The questions she's asked, carefully, trying not to push too hard, the opening she's created, hoping he'd step through, the nights she's lain awake next to him, feeling the space between them and wondering what's in it. And he's felt her trying and loved her for it and kept the door closed anyway. Not because he doesn't trust her, because he trusts her too much. Because she's one of the only good things in his life, and he will not risk losing her by showing her what he really is. This is the intimacy paradox. The deeper the relationship, the more complete the performance must be. Acquaintances get casual deflection. Yeah, I served. It was a long time ago. Strangers get polite nothings. But a wife gets the most careful construction of all. Because a wife would notice the cracks in a casual performance. And because a wife has the power to hurt him in ways a stranger never could. so he gives her the best version of himself he can manage, the version that attends to her needs, that shows up for their children, that builds the life they've built together. It's not fake, exactly. He really does love her. He really is committed to the marriage. But there's a room in him that stays locked, and she knows it's there, has learned not to knock on that door, and the knowing is its own kind of loneliness. Now picture the grandson. He's 10, maybe 12, bright-eyed, curious, still believes the world makes sense. He's heard Grandpa was in the war, seen the photo on the mantel, the one in uniform, and he wants to know more. His history class covered World War II last month. He wrote a report. Now he wants the real story, from someone who was there. Grandpa, what did you do in the war? The old man looks at his grandson's face, clear eyes, innocent in the truest sense, on the right side of the line, where life still makes sense and violence is still unthinkable. He still believes in heroes. He still thinks war is something from movies and textbooks. What does the grandfather say? He could tell the truth, the real truth. He could describe what it felt like to kill a man, and then another, and then to lose count. He could explain how the fear tasted like metal in your mouth, how your hands shook afterward, how the faces come back at night decades later. He could show the boy what war actually is, what it costs, what it does to the people who fight it. But he won't, can't, because the boy is still innocent, and the old man knows what that innocence costs to lose, and he will not be the one who takes it. So he tells a war story, the version that works for a 12-year-old. Danger and bravery and coming home. Nothing about the killing, nothing about the transformation. Nothing about the glass wall that even now, 50 years later, stands between the old man and everyone he loves. When he's done, the boy says, "Thanks for your service, Grandpa," because that's what you say. The old man nods, accepts it, carries still what he carried then. This moment, small and ordinary, happens in some form every time a veteran interacts with someone who hasn't crossed the line. The calculation, what can they handle? The editing, what version serves them best? The protection, how do I love them without burdening them with what I know? It's protective and it's isolating and it's both at the same time. The veterans' children sense it, even if they can't name it. Dad is there, present at dinners, at ball games, at graduations, but also somehow not there. There's a reserve they've felt their whole lives without understanding. A part of him that never quite reached them, no matter how much he loved them. They probably wondered growing up whether it was their fault. Kids think that way. Why doesn't Dad connect with me the way other dads connect with their kids? They couldn't know that the distance wasn't about them at all. It was about what Dad was carrying and what he refused to put down anywhere near them. The old friends notice it too. The guys who knew him before the war remember someone different, more open maybe, less guarded. They've watched him change over the years, or rather, watched him not change back from whatever the war made him. They've learned to accept the person he became, but sometimes they miss the person they lost. And the veteran knows all of this, feels the distance from his wife, his children, his friends, wishes he could close it, understands why he can't, because closing it would mean opening the locked door, and opening the door would mean showing them what's inside. And showing them what's inside would mean watching their faces change, watching them try to reconcile the person they thought they knew with the person standing in front of them, watching them wonder, even if they tried to hide it, who they've been living with all these years. He'd rather carry it alone than see that look in their eyes. So the distance remains. The door stays locked. The people who love him most stay in this one essential way, the farthest away. And he protects them by withholding himself, and withholds himself because he loves them, and loves them across a gap that no amount of love seems able to close. That's what intimacy looks like behind the glass. Functional, even loving, but incomplete in ways that never quite resolve. We've covered the daily labor, the constant performance, the impossible position with family and friends. What we haven't reckoned with yet is the weight of it. The accumulated cost, day after day, year after year. What it means that society asked these men to become this, and then expected them to carry it quietly, alone, forever. What do we owe the people we turned into permanent strangers? Let me tell you something about what society asks of soldiers. Not the part that goes in the brochures, the part nobody mentions. We train them to kill. That's the job, when you strip away the euphemism. We take young people who believe human life is sacred, who were raised in churches and schools that taught them exactly that, and we train them to overcome that belief when necessary. We teach them to identify threats, to pull triggers, to do the thing they've been told their whole lives is unforgivable. The training works. That's the point of it. We're very good at turning civilians into soldiers, at taking the hesitation out of a man's hands, the pause out of his trigger finger, at making him capable of what he needs to be capable of. Then we send him to a place where that capability is needed. He uses it. He does what he was trained to do, what we needed him to do, what the situation demanded. And he comes home, if he's lucky, carrying the weight of what he did. And here's where it gets interesting. Once he's home, we expect him to be normal again. We give him a parade, a handshake, a thank you for your service. We tell him the VA will help with anything he needs. We welcome him back into civilian life as if he's still a civilian, as if the transformation we required of him was a temporary costume he can now remove. He can't remove it. We made sure of that. The capability we needed required a permanent change. The ability to kill without hesitation doesn't switch off when you take off the uniform. The knowledge of what you're capable of doesn't file away because the war ended. We asked him to become this. He did. And now he carries the cost while we enjoy the benefit. Picture it, 1,945. A soldier walks down Main Street, banners flying, everyone celebrating. He did his job, he won his war, he's home. Same man, different night. He lies awake at 3 a.m. staring at the ceiling. His wife sleeps beside him. He can hear her breathing, but he's somewhere else. He's remembering a face. He's carrying a weight. He's paying a bill that came due the day he crossed the line and keeps coming due every night since. In the morning he'll get up, make breakfast, go to work, be normal. He's been doing this for 20 years. He'll keep doing it for the rest of his life. The parade lasted one day. The wait is forever. Now multiply that by every combat infantryman who came home from that war, and the next war, and the next. Millions of men carrying in silence what they did for the rest of us, performing normalcy for decades, going to their graves with the weight still on their shoulders. The bill isn't paid in combat. Combat is hard, yes. Men die, men are wounded. The danger is real, the suffering is real. Nobody dismisses that. But the bill is paid after. The bill is paid in the years, decades, of living as a stranger among family, of pretending to be someone you stopped being the day you crossed the line. The bill is paid in the marriages where your wife knows you're holding something back but can't reach it. The bill is paid in the distance from your children, the friendships that never quite connect, the nights when sleep won't come because the faces won't leave. The bill is paid in being thanked for your service by people who have no idea what that service actually was, and who would probably rather not know. Here's what we don't like to think about. We knew. We knew what we were asking. We knew that training someone to kill changes them. We knew that combat leaves marks that don't heal. We've known this since the first war, since the first soldier came home different from how he left. We asked anyway, because we needed it, because defense requires it, because the alternative, a world where no one is willing to do violence on behalf of the rest, is a world that can't protect itself. But we could at least be honest about what we asked. We could acknowledge that serving your country means, for some soldiers, becoming something that no longer fits in the country they served. We could admit that the distance we sense in veterans isn't a malfunction, isn't a failure to readjust, but the predictable result of what we asked them to become. Instead, we thank them for their service and change the subject. The politicians who send young men to war speak of sacrifice and duty, of protecting freedom and serving the nation. They're not wrong, exactly. These things are real. But the language sanitizes what actually happens. Sacrifice sounds noble. It doesn't sound like lying awake at 3 a.m. for 50 years. The families who welcome soldiers home believe they're reuniting with someone who left. They're not wrong to hope, but the hope itself can become a burden. The veteran feeling the weight of their expectation, trying to be who they need him to be, failing quietly in ways they'll never know. The society that celebrates victory with parades and monuments gets to enjoy the security those soldiers provided. That's the deal, right? They fought so we could live in peace, and that's true. But the peace they provided for us isn't the peace they get to share. They brought the war home with them. They carry it still. This is the bill nobody mentions. Not the cost paid during war, but the cost paid after. Not the casualties counted in battle, but the casualties walking among us, functional, often invisible, carrying weight that doesn't lift because we designed it not to lift. We asked them to become this. They did. The least we could do is see it clearly. So what do we owe them? Not pity. Pity is condescending. It treats them as victims, as broken things that need our sympathy. They don't want your pity. Most of them would refuse it if you offered. Not worship either. Worship is distancing. It puts them on pedestals, makes them something other than human. It lets us admire them from far away without actually seeing them. They don't want to be heroes. Most of them will tell you the real heroes didn't come back. What they want is simpler and harder than either of those. They want acknowledgement that they gave up something real. Not just time, not just safety, not just the years they spent far from home. Something more fundamental, a version of themselves that doesn't exist anymore. The innocent version, the version that still believed what civilians believe. Acknowledgement that what was given doesn't come back. Time heals many wounds, but some changes aren't wounds, they're transformations. The person who left for war really is gone. The person who came back is someone different. That's not failure. That's not damage. That's the cost of what we asked them to do. Acknowledgement that most of us will never understand. The gap exists. It's real. It's permanent. No amount of books or documentaries or conversations will let a civilian fully grasp what a combat veteran carries. And that's okay. It has to be okay, but we could at least stop pretending the gap doesn't exist. Stop expecting them to explain what can't be explained. Stop waiting for them to open up as if opening up would solve anything. Here's what acknowledgement looks like in practice. Accepting that the person who came home is not the person who left, and that this is not a problem to be solved. Families who want to support veterans, stop waiting for your son, your husband, your father to return. He's not returning. Learn to love who came back instead, not as a damaged version of who left, but as a different person who deserves love on his own terms. Stop asking him to open up. He's not keeping secrets from you to be difficult. He's protecting you from knowledge that would burden you. If he wanted you to know, he'd tell you. If he's not telling you, trust that he has reasons. Honor his silence instead of pushing against it. Stop measuring his healing by whether he becomes who he was. He's not going to become who he was. Healing for him means learning to live as who he is now, functional, present, able to love and work and contribute. That's success. That's the best case. Don't make him feel like he's failing because he can't recover something that was never recoverable. For all of us, the society that asked these men to become what they became, acknowledgement means honesty about what we asked. It means not hiding behind euphemism. Thank you for your service is a dodge. If you want to thank someone for something, know what you're thanking them for. They didn't serve coffee. They didn't serve papers. They killed people for your benefit. If that's uncomfortable to say, imagine how uncomfortable it is to carry. It means funding the programs that help, and not pretending those programs fix the unfixable. VA hospitals, mental health support, job training, these matter. They genuinely help veterans function, manage symptoms, build post-war lives. But they don't reverse the transformation. They don't restore innocence. Support the programs, but don't imagine they settle the debt. It means sitting with discomfort instead of papering over it. When you meet a veteran and feel the glass wall between you, the sense that he's seeing you differently than you see him, don't rush to close the gap with platitudes. Let it exist. Let him exist as he is, not as you need him to be. Your discomfort with the distance is tiny compared to his experience of living on the other side of it. It means remembering, not the sanitized version, not the heroic statues and the feel-good movies. The real version, that we asked young people to become capable of killing, and they did, and they came home carrying that capability forever. That's not glory. That's not tragedy. That's the deal we made with them. We should at least remember the terms. Let me take you back to where we started. 1945, Main Street, USA. A soldier walks among civilians celebrating a victory he helped secure. Between him and everyone else, invisible but absolute, the glass wall stands. He looks the same as he did when he left. Same face, same name, same uniform, now dusty with the dirt of a dozen countries. His mother cries with joy. His girl throws her arms around him. Everyone's so happy. And behind the glass, he watches it all and feels the distance and knows he'll spend the rest of his life on this side of it. But here's what we can see now that we couldn't see then. He's not broken. He's not damaged. He's not failing to reintegrate. He's transformed. He did something we needed him to do, and the doing changed him permanently. And the change is not a defect, but a consequence. He'll learn to function in this world. He'll hold a job, raise a family, be a good neighbor. He'll attend the reunions and the memorial services. He'll answer the questions from grandchildren with carefully edited stories. He'll nod when people thank him for his service. And some part of him will always be standing at that parade, looking through the glass at a world he can see but no longer fully inhabit. That's not tragedy. That's what we asked him to become. No soldier ever really survives a war. The ones who come home survive it in a specific way, by continuing forward day after day, carrying what they carry, functioning despite the weight, loving despite the distance, living despite the part of them that died the first time they crossed the line. They keep doing this, year after year, without recognition, without understanding, without being seen for what they actually are. They walk among us as permanent strangers, protecting the innocence they can no longer claim. That protection is a gift they give us every day, whether we notice or not, by not burdening us with what they know. The least we owe them, the very least, is the honesty to see it. To stop pretending they came home the same, to stop expecting them to become who they were, to stop thanking them for something we can't name with a phrase we don't mean, to simply look at them clearly, accept what we see, and acknowledge the weight. They carried it for us. They carry it still, and they'll carry it to the grave, quietly, without complaint, because that's what soldiers do. They complete the mission. The mission now is living. They report for duty every morning, and they do the job, and they don't ask to be understood. But they deserve to be seen. Remember that. The next time you pass a veteran on the street, he's not asking for anything. He doesn't need your pity or your worship. He just needs you to know, somewhere in the back of your mind, that the man walking past you has crossed a line you'll never cross, a line you'll never have to cross, because he crossed it for you. That's the truth about innocence. It doesn't fade with age. It doesn't erode with experience. It dies in a specific moment with a specific action, and it stays dead forever. And the people who lost theirs so we could keep ours, they walk among us every day, carrying what they carry, protecting what they protect. No soldier ever really survives a war, but some of them keep walking anyway. That's not tragedy. That's service. The real kind.